In what city are you in a hotel?
I am in Paris.
Oh, you're in Paris. Wow.
Yes. As Alex pointed out, this is a new one. We've had a class from China, we've had a class from Dubai, and now we have a class from Paris.
There you go.
Considering the alternatives, this one's pretty boring.
You're getting closer to Toronto each time. So.
Okay. So Shavuot Tov, everyone. We are going to be looking at Yehoshua chapter 2. And this week is going to be a good example. We're going to see one or two things that, one of the things I mentioned is we're going to discuss sometimes things that have to do with the chapter itself, and sometimes we're going to have kind of windows into larger topics or larger discussions, understandings of the methodology of Tanakh. So we're going to have one of those, hopefully one of those windows in this chapter. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start. Okay. Those of you who I don't know if I see some of you have Chumashim. Hopefully there's enough there for everyone. We're going to be spending a little bit, not the whole time, but a little bit, looking in the Chumash as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. Okay, and Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 men out of Shittim to spy secretly, saying, "Go see the land and Jericho." And they went and came to the house of an innkeeper named Rachav, and they lay there. So the first correction I need to make to translation, the word innkeeper is not an accurate translation. The literal translation from Hebrew is prostitute. Okay? So the understanding is that usually, or in this case, or I guess this case and some other times, that a prostitute may have also been an innkeeper, and one of the services of her inn was intimate services. But the Hebrew word, unquestionably, is the word zonah, means prostitute.
I have the Koran. I have the Koran, and they do say harlot as opposed to
harlot.
Innkeepers.
Right. Why it's translated as innkeeper is actually quite an interesting tale, or quite an interesting story in its own. But we're not going to discuss that at the moment. Okay, so we have our first verse. You read the first verse. Can you guys hear me? It looks like we have a connection problem. For those of you who are watching online, it's going to take a moment to fix the connection with the Toronto group. So we're just going to wait for them to come back online. If there is anyone watching online, just if I would appreciate if someone can send a comment, just for me to know that it actually is streaming. Just a moment. Just a moment. We will get the Toronto group back in a moment. Hello?
Okay, we lost you before.
Yeah, I know. But
so I think we finished on.
Yes, here we go.
Why is it called innkeeper? Why is it called innkeeper?
Well, what I said is that I'm not going to go into why it is it's translated in innkeeper. I said that's its own very interesting story, or very interesting. No, it's more has to do with with the different stages of commentary and how commentary could sometimes get misunderstood. But we're not going to discuss that now. We're just going to leave it as that they went to the house of a prostitute and they lay there. Okay, so we read this first verse. Okay, let's read it quickly again. And Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men out of Shittim to spy secretly, saying, "Go see the land and Jericho," and they went. Okay, and they came to the house of a prostitute named Rachav, and they lay there. What questions come to mind when we read this verse?
Which verse? The first one.
The first verse.
Why is Jericho separate from the land?
Okay, good. Why does it say go see the land and Jericho? If you're seeing the land, you're seeing Jericho. Okay, good. Yes.
Why would Joshua risk sending spies given that it was such a bad experience the last time?
Perfect. What is Joshua thinking? Meaning what? You don't remember what happened? Last time spies went, they ended up wandering the desert for 38 years. And of all people, Joshua should know better. Why Joshua specifically?
Because he was one of the spies of the original.
He was one of the original spies. He happened to be one of the good spies, right? He was one of the 2 spies out of the 12 that was not punished. But, like, what are you thinking? You're just yes.
Speak.
What?
But he speak.
I'm sorry?
When they're in the Midbar, he didn't speak good about the land.
Oh no, he did. He and Caleb together did. Yes.
Because I was reading, nothing was saying it's just Caleb.
No. Caleb is the one who spoke up first, but both of them together said, Tovah haaretz me'od me'od. The land is very, very good. It says it in the plural. So Yehoshua did. So I agree. I agree with Sivya. The fundamental question is.
I have an idea.
Yes, please.
Sorry for being late. I had a toothache. So my idea is that Yehoshua said to himself that now the group, the men, the people were in another situation. First off, because they already had one experience that was very, very bitter, that finished very bitterly. Second, because I see Yehoshua speaks very little. The first time the Meraglim were sent, they did an entire discourse. What you should do, what you do, what you should look for, and so on and so forth. So in this case, he is very reduced in saying what needs to be done. And basically, as somebody said here, it was because he already had this experience. The second time,
right. So you're saying
he hoped they are not going to fall on the same storm.
Right. So you're saying Yehoshua is making a assessment, or he thinks that the people have matured or have learned from their mistake, and now they can do it the right way. That is definitely possible, but the question is still, fine. Let's say Joshua doesn't think that they're going to repeat the mistakes of last time because they've learned their lesson. But the question is still, it's as Sivya said it, which is, why send them at all? Fine. Batya, let's say he's not scared they're going to make this. Let's say he's not scared they'll make the same mistake. But what's the point of sending them at all? In 3 days, they're about to go into the land. Why send them at all?
Because the first time there were lots of doubts. And this time, look how they move. And the first step they move, they fall into the house of Rahab.
No, but the question is, why? What is the reason? He doesn't know they're going to go to Rahab's house. What is the reason to send them at all?
Because Hashem Yitbarach certainly have told him to do it.
No, where?
It's not written, yeah.
No, quite the opposite. With the first spies, Hashem told Moshe, send spies. Over here, we don't see that Yehoshua was told to send spies. Yes, Paul.
I'm just wondering what one would read into to spy secretly. I mean, if you spy, it is always secret. Is it secret from the people, or is it secret from who they're spying on?
Okay, excellent. So,
I'll let the rabbi say it.
So you're saying, why does it say secretly? Who is it? It says he sent 2 people secretly. So who is the secret from? So I want to take, Paul, what you're saying, and what Batya said about the fact that with Moshe,
If we could, we would shake hands on this.
that Moshe gave them detailed instructions, whereas with Yehoshua we don't see too many instructions being given. And what I want us to do is I want us to look, to compare. So if you could please open up to Bamidbar chapter 13. Bamidbar chapter 13. And what we're going to do is we're going to look and we're going to try to find similarities, but more importantly, differences. Differences between how the first spies were sent and how these spies were sent. And in those differences, hopefully we'll be able to understand what Yehoshua is trying to do here, or why is he not afraid, or what is he... Okay. Everyone have it? What's the page?
It's clearly the role of Rahab here is definitive.
We'll see. We will definitely get to Rachav as well. Okay. Everyone have everything okay over there?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not actually that much. We're just going to look at the first 3 verses. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having some technical difficulties here. Okay. Okay, so the pasuk says the following. We're looking at Bamidbar now. Hashem said to Moshe, saying, "Send men to scout the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelite people. Send 1 man from each of their ancestral tribes. Each one is a chieftain among them." So Moshe, by Hashem's command, sent them out from the wilderness of Paran, all of them men being leaders of the Israelites. Okay, differences.
He sent out 1 from the tribe. There were 12, not 2.
Good. Okay. So one difference being over here, Yehoshua is sending 2 spies, whereas Moshe sent 12. Okay. What else? That's 1.
Shlach lecha.
Meaning? Well, this goes to what we said before, that Hashem commanded Moshe to send them, and whereas over here, Joshua seems to be taking the initiative himself. Okay, what else?
I mean, it doesn't say it directly, but my point that I was trying to hint at earlier is this seems much more public.
Which? In Bamidbar?
In Bamidbar.
Absolutely. Where do you see that? Where do you see that? Yeah, I agree with you. I think there are 2 places in which we see one, the fact that you're taking known people. Not only, it says you're taking chiefs, you're taking heads of the tribes, and so much so, you're numbering each one from the tribe of Yehuda, from the tribe, meaning it seemed to be almost like it seems like it was almost like a ceremony.
Correct.
It was, a point was made for everyone to see, look, the head or one of the leaders of the tribe is going, you're a representative, you're a representative, you're a representative. Who are the 2 people that Joshua is sending?
Don't know.
We have no idea. Right? We have no idea.
Could we say that the first time it was a premature democracy? It was too early to ask everybody to have an idea, to have an opinion, and so on and so forth. Yehoshua is much more strategic. He's much more to the point. He's much more concrete.
So excellent. Yes, I think the answer to that is yes. But that will. I think we can find a source for this. I think we can find a little bit. What are the other differences that we see between the verses? So what do we have so far? We have the number 2 verses 12. meaning 2 is a small, meaning if you want to send spies, you're going to send 12 people? You're going to send 12 people? You can't send 12 people quietly. You can't send 12 people quietly as far as when you're sending them or the place you're sending them to. 12 people cannot hide, or not very easily, right? Whereas 2 people can go quietly. So we have the difference of 2 versus 12, public versus not public. We have so what else? Yes.
He said meraglim. It's special people.
Anashim meraglim, correct. And meaning it seems like it almost seems like it's professional spies. 2, it says he sent, and it works better in the Hebrew. In Hebrew it says shnaim anashim meraglim, 2 people who were spies. It doesn't just say people to go and spy. It's this, meaning it's describing that these are people who are spies. It almost seems like these were professionals who were trained for this, whereas the heads of the tribe, their main qualification is that they were leaders of the people. Just because someone is a politician or a leader doesn't mean he knows how to spy, right? Okay. What? Yes. Yes.
The nice thing is we can say that he said 12 people because at once Hashem wanted everybody to be responsible for what they were about to do.
Okay, now, but that brings us to the question, what is it exactly what was the mission of each one of the spies? But before that, I think there were a few more comments. Yes?
Well, this is going back on the word of meraglim. In Yehoshua it says meraglim, but in Bamidbar it says vayaturu. That's, I think, has a slightly different meaning.
Yes, I'll get to it in a second. Absolutely, that's the difference, the additional difference I was looking for. Yes.
What does it mean?
They didn't only give a mission. They come to Rahab only to get information. And they even didn't go to the land, whatever, they ran away.
You say that they did not get, you're saying that's not a mission?
The mission was to get information. They got everything from Rahab, and then they come back.
Okay.
They didn't explore the land.
Because Yehoshua told them, go look for the land and Jericho. It's like 2 separate things.
Right. Okay. So that goes back to Paul's question. Why does it specify the land and Jericho? Let's put it. We'll put that on the side for a moment.
There's another question.
Yes.
Meraglim cheresh. What does it mean, meraglim cheresh?
Meraglim cheresh is secret spies versus the 12 spies who did not. The 12 spies who did not try to conceal themselves.
Because in Vishlach Melech, the king sends people to Rahab, and he says.
Wait, we'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there. We'll get there. I know what you're going to ask. Let's wait with it for a moment. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you asked earlier, Rabbi, about the 12. It almost seems like that was a political mission to get consensus from each of the tribes to say, okay, let's go. The leaders are going, and they're going to tell each of their own people that this mission.
Absolutely, excellent, and that difference is reflected in the mission that they were given, where Moshe gives them, and we've discussed this a few times in the past few years, that Moshe focuses on. I want to just point out one more very small difference, but it helps this direction that we're going in. In both places, meaning both in Bamidbar and Bayas, in Yehoshua, the location from where the Meraglim are being sent is mentioned. Okay, in Yehoshua it says, and Yehoshua son of Nun sent 2 men out of Shittim. And over there it says he sent them from Midbar Paran, from the wilderness of Paran. Now, Now, maybe you and mine, our geography knowledge of ancient geography is not that great. But if we really knew what they were talking about, Midbar Paran is very far away from the land of Israel. It's far. It's a week and a half walking distance, something of that sort. Okay, it's far. Whereas Shittim they're adjacent to the land. They're right by the Jordan River, basically. So the fact, meaning so I agree with what he's saying, Paul, and therefore their mission, to Moshe's mission to them is assess the land. And if you remember, we saw this last year or 2 years ago. His focus is always on check the land. Is it plentiful? Is it not plentiful? Check the land. Does the land have fortified cities, or does the land not have fortified cities? Look at the land. Are the people of the land big and strong, or are the people of the land not big and strong? The spies, among other things, their mistake is that, like, Moshe wanted them to ignore, meaning they were there to evaluate the land, and they got distracted by all those other things. But the people of the land and the cities of the land and the fruit of the land were all just supposed to be indicators to the quality of the land. So the spies could come back to the people and say, listen, this place that God wants to take us, it's wonderful, it's so exciting, we'll tell you how great it is. Basically to convince the people or to sell the people on the plan. But over here, they've been traveling for 40 years. They're on the brink, right? Remember, what did Joshua say to the people last chapter? Get ready. 3 more days. We're going into the land. They knew. They're all ready already. They've been there for a while. That's it. They're about to go into the land. We don't need 2 spies to go and tell us the land's great, we should go along with the plan. They're all ready. They're getting ready. Rather, it seems a lot more about tactics. Okay, we're going to go into the land, and we're going to attack Jericho. So go quietly, as spies, to figure out what spies need to figure out. Look at the city. What are the weak spots? Where should we go? And therefore, that also helps explain why, of all places, did they go to the house of a prostitute? Why would they go there?
She knows a lot of people.
Yes. She knows a lot of people. You can imagine the type of people who hang out at the house of a prostitute. If you want to, get someone drunk and hear him, give away all kinds of secrets or milk them for information or whatever, that's the type of place you go. You don't go to the palace of the king or the court. You go. You
go to a person that has to do with much public.
Yes. You go to where the lowlifes are, maybe, or where the lower element of society, or maybe where you have dignitaries who come and don't want to know, whatever. It makes sense. You go to the bar. You go to the bars, right? That's where you go.
Rabbi speech. There is an idea. It reminds me when the son of Yaakov go down to Mitzrayim.
Yes.
The first time. They were also 12.
Yes.
And the subject also brings up the problem of being considered spies. You remember that?
Yes, correct. Yes,
but
correct.
I believe that one of the most beautiful things about this comparison, and thank you for bringing such interesting material, I believe that one of the most interesting things is understanding that is to see how it is very important to have an event that is very strange, very particular, to have it repeated. When a human repeats, it's the second time he sees the same thing. He is much stronger, is more prepared, and so on and so forth. And Yehoshua very shortly says to them, get ready because you are going once more to see marvels. And they see marvels.
I would agree with everything you said up until the marvels. We haven't seen anywhere in the book of Joshua yet anything about miracles. And although you're right, when we get to the falling of Jericho, we will see miracles. But when Joshua says to the people in the first chapter that they're going to go into the land of Israel, quite the opposite. His emphasis is on the fact that they need to go and fight. And he says to the 2.5 tribes, you need to be up front, and you need to be no matter how long it takes. You will not be able to settle your land until the entire land is conquered. It's portrayed as a very human endeavor. You're right, we will see later on some miracles, not many. Some miracles, but as far as the people's mindset, it looks and remember, and Joshua also said to them in chapter 1, he said, prepare food for yourselves. That's the opposite. That's the opposite of the mindset they had in the desert, where they did not have to prepare anything. Quite the opposite. If they were to prepare food ahead of time, it was considered to be a lack of faith. Right? If they were to in the desert, if they were to store food for the future, for the following day, that was considered to be a sin and a lack of faith. And over here in chapter 1, we saw how Joshua says to them, prepare food, because the whole mindset is, as we discussed last week, is switching once they go into the land of Israel. And it seems to be, it's supposed to be a very human endeavor. Okay. So
I forgot. Does he not say also you're going to see marvels?
No, it does not. Not in the first chapter of Joshua. Not so far in the book of Joshua. There is nothing about marvels, nothing about miracles. Anyhow, sorry. So, okay, so we have here, our first question, our big question, which was, why is Joshua taking the risk of repeating the disaster of the tribes in the desert? Our answer is, he's doing it in a much, much better version. Meaning, he's not repeating it. He's learned the lesson, and he is sending spies. It seems to be, he's giving them a very specific mission, which is to help prepare for the battle of Jericho, which was not the mission that the 12 tribes were given. The 12 tribes were given the mission of, go as tourists, get them, and come back with reflections on the quality of the land. Okay, he seems to tell them, give us info on Jericho, because that's where we're going to that's the first place we're going to hit as the entrance to the land. Okay, we're going to enter the land. To your question, Paul, we're going to enter the land via Jericho, and entering Jericho and conquering Jericho will be the foothold of entering and conquering the land. Okay.
And I just might add, the other difference, I suppose, is that because the others were princes, I think we've learned out before that they might have had another agenda.
Correct, absolutely.
So these two spies have no other agenda about
correct, absolutely. You're right. As the Midrashim say in numerous times, that they had ulterior motives. They were politicians, and it makes sense that as politicians, as leaders, they might have had ulterior motives or additional agendas or other things going on, because they were seen already as people in position, because they were known to have responsibility, or whatever reasons. Whereas these two people are anonymous. Chazal come and tell us it might have been this person and that person, but the text, the verses themselves, make a point of keeping them anonymous. And it's done secretly. It is quite possible that no one else knew. And also we'll see later on when they come back and they report exclusively to Joshua. Whereas we'll see later on, when the 12 tribes came back, who did they report back to? To everyone. They spoke to Moshe. At the same time that they spoke, they addressed the entire people, because it was a public mission. They were sent as an official delegation. They didn't meet necessarily with any representatives, but they were sent very publicly. these guys are being sent. These guys are being sent as secret spies. No one else knows about it, with a very specific mission to infiltrate Jericho and come back with pertinent information about Jericho. Okay, so I think it's very, very obvious that the first verse is trying very hard to contrast what Joshua is doing with what Moshe did, which, by the way, is an interesting point. We spoke last week at great length about how Joshua was the continuation of Moshe, and how on the one hand he sees himself not as completely independent, rather a continuation of on a lower level. Even so, we see here him, I guess, being able to do something in a successful way, something that Moshe in some way failed at, Joshua is succeeding at. Okay, let's continue. Yes, please.
It's a little bit outside, but why Yehoshua was appointed? Don't somebody from the tribe of Yehuda supposed to be a leader?
Again,
from tribe of Ephraim.
Yes.
So why somebody from tribe of Ephraim was appointed a leader to bring people of Israel to land of Israel?
Why not? Why shouldn't it be someone from the tribe of Manasseh?
Because we know that Yehuda is supposed to be the leader.
How do we know this?
Being a leader.
What? How do we know that the tribe of Yehuda is supposed to be the leader?
From the blessing of Jacob.
Yeah, he says that. He says that from you will come leaders.
Yeah. Why not?
We don't know when that is. It doesn't necessarily mean that there will not be any other leaders. Remember, the first king of Israel was also not from the tribe of Yehuda. The first king of Israel is Saul, is Shaul, who's from Binyamin.
And he was appointed by God.
Correct. So was Joshua. Joshua was also appointed by God. So I guess that means that Jacob's blessing either was not the right time, it was not yet, it was not time for it to be fulfilled yet, or maybe it's not that maybe it's not an exclusive. Maybe there's no exclusivity to it. But I think the more common understanding is that's referring to once they enter the land, once they conquer the land, once the people are unified, and when it's time to have a single leader who is like in the with sovereignty, with capital, etc., in the perfect situation, then that becomes when the tribe of Judah takes the leadership. But look, but again, the question, God chose Joshua, right? Moshe says to God, to Hashem, please, I beseech you that you appoint a person on the nation who will be able to bring them and take them and be able to. And Hashem says, yeah, I have. Hashem says, I have just the guy for it, Joshua. Okay, let's continue.
I mean, Moshe probably would have preferred one of his descendants, right?
Probably not, actually. He had two.
They didn't inherit.
He had two sons, and what we know about them is nothing.
I appreciate they didn't inherit, but ideally.
And if nothing is mentioned about them, that usually means there's nothing much to say about them. Maybe nothing good, and maybe also nothing bad. But the fact that his two sons, and by the way, he is not the only one who has sons who are. There are many such examples. You have Aaron, you have Aaron with his two first sons. We'll see it later on. Later on, when we get to the book of Shoftim, of Judges, with Eli. Eli had two sons who sinned and were punished gravely. Samuel, the prophet, Shmuel, also had two sons who also did not. Over there, their sins are a lot more explicit. It seems that at least at a certain stage in Tanakh, the idea that it's more about your personal achievements and level and less about your ancestry. Although there definitely are places where ancestry is significant when it comes to kings. But when it comes to a spiritual leadership versus political leadership, in political leadership, it seems that succession of within the family is important. I think this is my theory. That has to do with the institution of kingship and the institution of order in the nation. When kings are overthrown and a new dynasty begins, that is potential for chaos. For institutionally, so as the army, as far as government, as far as etc. But the prophet is a educational, spiritual leader. So it's not an institution; it's an individual. It's a character. It's the charisma, and therefore, okay, that's a little bit off topic, but let's.
Thank you.
But although I do think there's a lot to those distinctions, and we will get to those distinctions. We will get to the balance between the authorities or the branches of the Jewish people later on as we get to the judges and as we get to the kings, and it's going to be some very, very interesting discussions and insights that we'll have that will also reflect very much to today's society, specifically in Israel. But we have some time to go before that. But at least maybe I gave you guys a teaser. Okay, let's continue a bit. Because at some point we will skip. Okay, we will skip because there's some important points. This is going to be one of those cases where we do not get a chance to read the entire chapter together, which is why I recommend always reading the entire chapter yourselves before the class. Okay. Verse 2, and it was told to the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, men have come here this night from the children of Israel to search the land. And the king of Jericho sent to Rachav, saying, Bring forth the men who have come to you, that have entered your house, for they have come to search out the entire land. Okay? So someone here asked before, how did the king know that they came? Okay, so just like the Jews have spies, he also has spies. He knows that the Jews are camped only a very short distance away. He knows that he has 3 million people who are very close by. So somehow they discovered it. Okay, they come. Okay, let's continue.
How did she know that this was going to happen?
Who?
Rahab.
She didn't. She didn't.
That the land was given to them.
Oh, wait. Okay, we'll get there. Yes, good. We'll get there. That's where I want to get to. Let's continue a bit. Verse 4. Now the woman had taken the 2 men and had hidden them. And she said, Indeed, the men came to me, but I did not know from where they were. And it was time to close the gate. This is part of what she's saying. And it was time to close the gate at darkness that the men went out. I do not know where they went. Pursue after them quickly, for you will overtake them. And she had brought them up to the roof, and she hid them with the stalks of flax, and she had lain arranged upon the roof. And the men pursued them in the direction of the Jordan to the fords. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, they shut the gate. Okay, and before they were asleep, she came up to them upon the roof. Okay, all this was just to kind of fill in the gap. Now I'll just point out something interesting here. It seems like she didn't know that they were spies until the king's people came and told her. She didn't. Only then did she realize, oh, now I have to. Okay, and it's okay. So let's see. What is she thinking? Why is she? Yes.
I just want to make a comment, a contrast. Like when the Meraglim went the 12, you could see that Hashem's hand was in it because nobody noticed that there were 12 people wandering about their country. That here, there's 2 people secretly, and then automatically they're discovered.
I don't know.
It's more not like Hashem. I don't know if it's nature, but all the mental course.
I'll tell you why I'm not so sure about that. Because remember that back then, the Jewish people had just left Egypt, not too long ago. They left Egypt, and they were a very far distance from the land of Canaan. If I'm a guy living in the land of Canaan, I see 12 random guys just walking around. I don't know, maybe they're merchants. I would have no reason to think that someone's spying the land. How would I have known that I don't know, 50 miles away, there's 3 million people. Yes, I know that these people left Egypt, that these slaves overthrew their masters, but I don't. Why would I know? What would make me think that they're about to come here, and therefore be on the lookout?
They look Jewish.
What does that mean? They look Jewish? Chances are they looked anywhere between Egyptians to Bedouins. What do they mean? What do they mean? They look Jewish? They weren't wearing yarmulkes and they weren't wearing tzitzit, right?
Or even black hats or shtreimels.
Right. They should have noticed them by their shtreimels. Correct.
But hadn't they had a few incidents with some other nations before they got to the status of the Meraglim, so that they knew that they were a force to be reckoned with?
Not bit. No. They had a fight with the Amalekites who attacked them. They hadn't yet fought against any other nation. They hadn't conquered anything. They were wandering in the desert. They were camped in the desert. Far away. Dozens of miles away, at least. It's very different when we're reading the story in the parsha over there. There's a lot of things we assume. But when you're reading this, and you look at this story, that story gets a very different perspective. Okay, because we still have quite a lot to do, and we'll skip ahead, but there's some very important points. Okay, so now we got to see Rachav. What is she thinking? Why is she not handing them over immediately? Okay, verse 9. And she said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all of the inhabitants of the land have melted away because of you. Meaning melted, meaning their hearts. Okay? In Hebrew, it's their hearts have melted. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you completely destroyed. Verse 11. And as soon as we heard, our hearts melted, nor did there remain any more spirit in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on the earth below. So, thoughts, questions, comments?
She did know about Jew.
She did know, yes. It did, but listen, by this point, the Jews have been wandering the desert for 40 years. So, and especially the wars that they conducted against Sihon and Og, meaning basically the fact that the Jewish people had conquered practically the entire land of what today is Jordan, or the Golan and Jordan, have basically conquered the entire eastern side of the Jordan River. This they knew. This was right. This was, everyone in the region knew. This was happening in front of their eyes. This didn't happen a long time ago. This happened 2 weeks ago. 2 or 3 weeks ago, they destroyed, over the last, month and a half, before this story taking place, they destroyed the entire eastern bank of the Jordan River and conquered all these nations. But it's interesting that she goes back to an event that happened 39 years ago, the splitting of the sea. Yes, Paul.
It doesn't seem, unless he didn't know who they were, the king of Jericho doesn't seem similarly frightened. He wants the men dropped it.
Okay, so what are you saying? That she's speaking, you're saying she's speaking only for herself?
She seems to be speaking in plural, all of us are concerned, but is she speaking for all of them?
Well, first of all, I think the example you're bringing is proof for the opposite. The fact that the king seems concerned and wants to find these 2 spies proves that he's scared, proves that he's worried. He wants to find the 2 spies.
Fair enough.
Okay, he wants to find the 2 spies, and even though they came, 2 of them quietly at night, they still were able to discover, meaning they must have been scrutinizing the walls or the things or the streets so carefully that because they're scared and they anticipate spies or they're afraid they're going to be spies because they know and they want to get ready. Okay, yeah.
One other quick point. I think we mentioned Amalek and the battle with Amalek earlier. My understanding was the whole issue with Amalek was it somehow cooled down all of our enemies so they were no longer as frightened.
Yes, but that was 39 years ago. Three weeks ago, they decimated two major kingdoms. Two, as far as the area of the land of Canaan, two major city-states or two major kings.
Right.
So, okay?
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting that there's a parallel. She numbers three things. She says in verse 9, I know that 1, the Lord has given you the land. 2, that terror has fallen upon us. And 3, all the inhabitants of the land have melted away because of you. So we are in fear, and we have no, in Hebrew it's more, and we have no ability to fight against you. So we're filled with fear. So, but it's interesting, she first starts from, I know that God has given you this land, and therefore I'm helping you. I know that God has given you this land, and that no one has enough courage and ability to fight against you. And therefore I'm helping you, and therefore I'm asking that, quid pro quo. I helped you, you helped me. Okay? I want us to skip for a second, even though it's a shame because there's some very interesting points. But we're going to skip from verse 12 until verse 22. Okay? Basically, we have the first peace accords, not peace accord, but first kind of international agreement kind of taking place, where they agree to this deal, where they and it's a very interesting thing of what they said and what her condition was, what their condition was, the fact that they said the condition twice, once before while they're still in her house, and after she lets them down, they promise it again, just to prove that they weren't just promising it because they had no choice because they were in her house. But we're going to skip all that. We're going to go to the last 3 verses. Okay? Everyone with me? Verse 22. And they went and came to the mountain and stayed there 3 days. Because she tells them, listen, go hide in the mountains for 3 days until the king's people give up finding you. Right? And they went and came to the mountains and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. And the pursuers sought them throughout all the way, but they did not find them. And the 2 men returned and descended from the mountain and crossed over and came to Joshua, the son of Nun, and told him all that had happened to them. And they said to Joshua, for the Lord has given, because Hashem has given into our hands all the land, and also the inhabitants of the country have melted away because of us. Now, before you say, wait, before we comment on this, I want to point out something. Let's go back to verse 22. I'm going to read it again. Think back to chapter 1, and there's a tremendous difficulty in this. And they went and came to the mountain and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. What difficulty arises from this verse on chapter 1? Yes?
Then Joshua said they were going to attack in 3 days, but then they went to spy and then they sat for 3 days. So doesn't this already make it more than 3 days? That's
okay,
the original.
so very good. Option 1 is, wait a second, so it's not 3 days, it's 6 days. What's another option? Option 1 is that there's 6 days. The 3 days that Joshua said, prepare for entering the land, and another 3 days until the spies got back. What's another option?
When did Joshua tell them 3 days from now?
Excellent. Or, you're so close. Or, when did Joshua send the spies?
Right.
Oh, before he even said the 3 days, maybe.
Correct. Meaning,
Okay.
it seems that chapter 2, chronologically speaking, happened when? Before chapter 1.
3 days before. Or
whatever. Parallel.
No, at the same time. Parallel. It's the same 3 days. Meaning, the 3 days that Joshua tells the people, prepare for 3 days, because right after these 3 days we're entering the land, are the 3 days that the spies went to Jericho, waited, and came back. It's
Plus
this
1 day that they were there and overnight and whatever till the morning.
So there's a whole calculation to figure out exactly, okay? But that raises a very difficult question. And this is when we come to methodology of the chronology of Tanakh. It seems, and many of the commentators understand it this way, that chapter 2 happened first. That the chronological order of the chapters is chapter 2 and 3 come first, and then chapter 1, chronologically speaking, comes after chapter 2 and 3. And then the obvious question is why? Why would the prophet, whoever it is that organized it, Joshua, why would he put the order of the chapters in the wrong order? Now, we've seen this idea before. We've encountered this idea of the order of the story of the Torah of Tanakh not fitting with the chronological order. We've seen this before, okay? And I want to use what we said last week to explain possibly why Joshua did it. If the book would have started with the story of the spies going to Rechav, meaning, let's say, what would be the difference if the book started with this story, or with the story of chapter 1? Let's remember what we saw in chapter 1. Chapter 1 came and gave us kind of an outlook, an overview of the entire book, or of the emphases. What are going to be the important points to look at? What are going to be the points that of struggle or of challenge for this book, and not only for this book, for the entire books of the prophets? It was 3 things: the land, the Torah, and the nation. And the combination of those 3 things, and the fact that all 3 need strength and perseverance. And that's what's changing from the desert, from the Exodus. If the story were to start, if the book were to start with chapter 2, it would give the wrong type of opening. It's like, look, it's about something technical. It's about this woman that they encountered. It's about the specific strategy. It's about being smart enough about how to send the spies. It's about this woman. Oh, we gained the land because this woman hid the spies and told them something. No, we don't enter the land. We don't acquire the land by some coincidence because this woman was God-fearing, who's this amazing woman, right? She's mentioned by name, which means she's not a nobody. She's not just a random prostitute. She's Rachav. She's a known prostitute. She's an important person, or becomes an important, but she's a known person. She's not a nobody. So Rachav is not the story, and the fact that this specific woman happened to be God-fearing and hid them, that's not the story. We did not acquire the land. The Jewish people do not enter the land because of some non-Jewish woman who happens to have seen the light. Not to take away from her merit, but that is not how the Jewish people enter the land. And that is not going to be the basis of all of this. Even if that happened first, we shouldn't confuse the technical way in which things happen with the value or the destiny that lie behind it. Chapter 1 outlines. It's almost like, if I had to say it in a bit of a provocative way, I'd say that when it comes to historical account in Tanakh, and maybe in general, when it comes to historical account, it is possible, this is what I hold, the actual events as they took place are less important than how they are being remembered, how they are being recorded, and how they're being told. I'll say that again. And it's not a simple thing that I'm saying. I'm saying the actual events. And the truth is, it's also this case in our own lives. A lot more important than the event itself is the impact that it had on us. It's how we remember the event.
Is the what?
Is how we remember the event.
Correct.
And if someone comes and says, no, I think if someone is traumatized by an event, saying to them, well, I think you remembered incorrectly, isn't enough. Because if I remember it a certain way, and I know how tricky what I'm saying is, because this could theoretically come and say, so the story of the Exodus didn't happen necessarily exactly as it is said, then my answer would be, not necessarily. Some of the details in the text are very blurry. You go to the Midrashim could bring conflicting accounts of the events themselves. But a lot more important than the physical event itself is how that physical event, however it took place, how it impacted us, how it impacted our history, how it impacted the formation of the nation, and how it told that story generation after generation. Yes. And therefore, the fact that chapter 2 happened first is brought later on, I think, because it is a lot less of a formative event than chapter 1, when Joshua is appointed as the successor, when the three foundations of the entrance to the land, the Torah, and the nation, and this trilogy, these three legs that are going to be the emphasis, and the nation accepting Joshua, that is the focus. That's the emphasis. That's the more central event, even if it happened later on. So
the same thing is that Israel declared war. Nobody knows about military cabinet discussion on Meraglim. Who knows what we prepare to the war? The most important is the war. That's the answer, I think.
Right. Now, I'll just add, there's one more thing here which I think is very, very significant. Okay? Because the spies come back, and it's interesting, what do they report? They don't report what we think was their mission. Their mission was to find the weak spots. It was supposed to be strategic. Come back and report. Okay, it seems to be, it doesn't say this explicitly, that their job was to help us be able to conquer Jericho. Do they do that? The truth is, they do. And this is a very, very important point. Once they hear Rahav's account, where to attack from is not important. Because, and this is a very, very fundamental idea, and I think it is very, very relevant for our days today, and this is going to be my political disclaimer, that a battle, the first place in which a battle is fought and won is in the psychology of the fighter.
Battle for the hearts.
The battle of the hearts. Yes, and the motivation. And Rachav reveals to them, listen, I'll tell you, I know God has given you the land already. You know how I know? Because everyone is terrified. And everyone is their hearts have melted out of the thought of having to battle against you. No one has, and at that point it says, in that case, if the other side does not have motivation to fight, if they're too scared to fight, if they're terrified from us, that's it. We've won. We've won. And if we had the time, we would go back and compare this to the first spies. It was exactly the opposite. the 12 spies come back, and we were like grasshoppers. They were giants in our eyes, and we were grasshoppers in theirs. Right? They come back, the 12 spies come back petrified, terrified of the thought of trying to battle. And over here, it's flipped. And the spies come back and they say, that's it. The land is ours. We will win. The other side lacks the motivation and the what's the word I'm looking for? And the courage to fight. They'll fight because they have no choice, but they lack the courage, conviction, and motivation. And I think when you come and there's a good example of something that could be translated to today, when you come and talk about conviction for battle versus, do we look at the technical gains and losses? How many people died? How many people didn't die? Who's suffering more? Is that the place in which we evaluate winning and losing? Or is it in motivation? Who has more motivation to fight? Who's showing more conviction to fight? Who is sticking to their guns, no pun intended, and is filled with more conviction about the stance, about their right to be in this land or on this side of the battle? Here, Oleg is pitching in. Every battle is won before it is even ever fought. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. So yes, I think this is the point that's being portrayed here, and it is a point that I think that is sometimes, especially today, especially in the West, including sometimes in Israel as well, we think that the battle is won just by the number of bullets that are shot, just the amount of destruction being done to one side versus another side, and we forget this point that they say here, that we don't even need to figure out where to attack from, because if we have the motivation, and we have the conviction, and we have the belief, and the other side does not, and the other side already recognizes that we have a right to the land, or we will conquer the land. God has given us the land, and they're terrorized and afraid, and lack the conviction, and lack the motivation, lack the courage. That's all we need to know. And this goes back. Last sentence, and this goes back to chapter 1, which we're going to go back to continuously. This goes back to chapter 1, that Hashem says to Yehoshua, be strong and overcome to inherit the land. Be strong and overcome and persevere to keep the Torah. Be strong and persevere. That all of these fronts of the land, the Torah, our culture, our identity, and the nation, the battle is won within our own psychology, our own conviction, our own strength, our own motivation, our own conviction. That's where the work is the most important, and that's where these battles are going to be won. These challenges will be met and succeed. Yes?
Isn't it true that they visit Rahab not by chance?
I'm sorry?
Rahab was not extraordinary woman because she became Yehoshua ben Nun's wife later, right?
So according to Chazal, according to the rabbis, according to the Medrash, she converts and she marries Yehoshua ben Nun. But for last year, we spent an entire year learning Midrash. Now we're back to trying to stick as much as possible to what the verses themselves. We do meet Rachav later on. We do. Okay, yes, Bate, you had something to say?
Rabbi Spitz, there is something very subtle, but the Torah is full of subtleties. There is something very subtle, which are the small signs that appear. For instance, the discourse, the revelation of Rahab is a sign. She says, I know Hashem gave you the land, and I know you are going to conquer the land. Those are small things, in the way that influence and that add up to the courage you are talking about. So this is those are totally subtle things. They're very nice.
Yes. Yeah.
What can we do with politicians?
So maybe politicians need to start learning the book of Joshua.
Yeah, exactly.
They both.
They need to start learning Navi. They need to learn the prophets and the stories, because there's nothing new here. These are challenges that we've encountered before, yes, this is why we learn this, and we will see many very relevant messages, and not just messages, just stories that have played out, and through the events of entering the land the first time, and the challenges that were met, and sometimes failures and sometimes successes. It will be extremely insightful in reflecting upon the return to the land of Israel in our own generation. There will be so many parallels. I won't even need to point them out. They will be so obvious. Because it means it's not something technical. It means that it has to do with these are inherent issues with the Jewish people returning to the land, or a nation of nomads, gaining sovereignty and returning to the history, to partaking in history as a nation. We're doing this now in our generation, and we've done it before. And looking back on how it happened the first time, what worked, what didn't work. This is the story of the prophets, and therefore it is vital in order to understand the events of our own generations.
But it's beautiful because the Torah is validating the time.
Absolutely.
After the failure of the first time, they had 40 years. So those 40 years were definitive for them to mature and understand, and so on and so forth. So we have to also be able to wait 40 years for our children to finally understand something.
Yeah.
But we are in era of first time.
Yes.
Paul, you wanted to finish with something? Yes.
Very quickly, about the chronology. If chapters 2 and 3 had come before 1, would all the things we said last week about they should be courageous be contingent on what spies report, as opposed to thematically for the whole?
You're saying, I hear what you're saying. I don't know, but
are we going on the fact that they were fearful, that's why we should be courageous, or should we be courageous because we're told that we should be?
Well, again, it was specifically to Joshua, right? Hashem said to Joshua, be strong and courageous, and then the people said to Joshua, be strong and be courageous. But of course, we understand that this is not something just being said to Joshua, but to all of us. And maybe when the spies come back, that is kind of reinforcing, or you're right, that happened first. So I guess after the spies told it to him, Hashem said it to him also. And in truth, in reality, first he hears from the spies that they're scared, and then Hashem says to him, be strong and courageous. But it's presented as that's the foundation of everything. Okay.
And how Jews as a millennia will read in order of the way it's printed, that we should be strong and courageous without evidence from spies that we should.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, it's a very good point. It's a very good it's a very good point. Yes, we should be strong and courageous when it comes to the land, to the Torah, and to the people, even without hearing that the other side, meaning not by being validated just because the other side is weak. It's a very good point, actually, Paul. Don't be confused. Don't be strong and courageous only because the other side is weak. That is not where you get your strength from. You get your strength from your own conviction, and from the promise of God, and from the destiny that was laid before you for millennia. Don't look for courage only in the other side's weakness and fear. Excellent point. Excellent point.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, everyone have a Shavua Tov.
Thanks so much.
Be well.